I'm currently very busy with like combining the process-oriented view with Bodynamic, and I'm talking to people about it. Some people who know both, and some people who only know one side. And it becomes more and more like obvious to me that they're both adding to each other the part that is missing.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I've been thinking about it the last several days about how to teach the process work in the Bodynamic system. And specifically, I've been thinking about writing it out, and making drawings and diagrams of like, okay, this is when you're starting a session, and then if this happens, then you go into this area, and then you go into that area, providing sort of a structure to the process work. I'm putting words to it because I feel like, I don't know if there's any books that have been written that really sort of write it out in such a way that someone reading it could understand it and then apply it in practice. I don't know. I just posted an article to the Bodynamic blog. What is it called? The non-tangible elements of therapy practice, I think is what it's called. I don't remember. There's a word for it.
Did you write it?
No, this was written by Leonard Ohlers, one of the original Bodynamic founders. The guy's really good. I think you would like him. I think he's dead now. I don't think he's alive anymore. Oh yeah, it's called Non-Specific Factors. And he's talking about studying process by studying of the non-specific factors, which has to do with what's called qualitative scientific research as opposed to quantitative.
I don't see it. Where is it?
I'll send you the link. This is the article that I just posted.
Because on page 2, the last one is developmental shock trauma. Ah, no, there's the third page. Okay.
No, it's on the second page. It's challenges on the way towards a common ground of body psychotherapy versus established areas of psychology. It's really long, and it's mostly not about that. It's mostly about trying to find common ground among all the different psychologies and bringing people together and critiquing each other so that you can build on it. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Okay.
I just finished reading it yesterday. It's long. It takes like maybe an hour to read through.
Wow, yeah, it's a whole chapter.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to know. So, but your basic question was, is there literature about the process work? And I think it's important to first get all the Bodynamic stuff out of your head before you go into that. So it's good to read something that's really not connected to Bodynamic at all, because process work has nothing to do with what Bodynamic offers. Bodynamic essentially is about knowing, is about know-how. And process work is basically about not knowing.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different approach.
That's what the Leonard Ohlers guy says. He's like, I train in Bodynamics, but what I try to do is like, if a client comes to me, then he puts it all on the side so that you can be open to something completely different. Because if people get hung up on their method might work for a bunch of people, but then it might not work for someone. He said he had a client come in, he said he had all these case studies and he did all this, and he had all those methods, and he just presented at a EABP conference about it. And then he went through and explained this like wonderful way that he works. And the client's like, oh, no, I don't want that. And he was like, oh shit. So he's like, okay, throw it all in the garbage kind of a thing. So he talks about that, about how people are inclined to do these things and how we need to really sort of step out of that, and how it can be sort of painful to do that sometimes, but how it's like very necessary, and how you want to open up your process to other colleagues. The article's really good.
Yeah, but that's a subject for advanced people, because a beginner has to like follow the guidelines.
Yes.
Yesterday I talked to a woman who did the foundation training, and she was asking me if she could visit me one day because she has questions on Bodynamic. I said, yes. What kind of question do you have? And she said, yes. Right now I'm learning the Bodynamic stuff like vocabulary, and I have some some little things that I want to ask you because I don't quite get them. And then I talked with her a bit, and suddenly it became clear that she's actually doing what you just said. She's kind of not looking at the client. She's looking at the client completely through the filter of Bodynamic analysis. And that completely inhibits her for being there.
Yeah, it's so hard. And like all the people in the Vancouver training are I mean, that's probably the number one thing that I see people having issues with. They try to understand their client through the Bodynamic lens exclusively. And then and most of them, they just can't do it. It just doesn't work. So then they just go, well, it's not working. And then they just go, well, to hell with it. I'm not going to use any of it.
Yes. It doesn't work because they're trying to do it intellectually. They're trying to do it with their head. And that's the problem with the teaching, because that's how it's taught.
Right.
So that's why, and I told her what I told you last time when I saw you in Munich. I said, Bodynamic is not a therapeutic school. It's a school for making therapists. So you should apply the knowledge only to the therapist. Because when the therapist is flexible in his character structures, he doesn't need the knowledge anymore. The client doesn't come for learning about Bodynamic. He comes for meeting someone who can help him to raise his level of being.
Yeah.
So, well, she said, oh, I never thought about that. And she said, yeah, forget the system when you're in therapy. Just use it between the therapy sessions for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's a little bit radical because, of course, I'm using it a lot of that in my therapy session.
Right.
But the basis is me. Actually, the basis is my body. And the Bodynamic is like fine-tuning my body and my awareness. And there is something in that the Bodynamic system doesn't teach, as far as I can see. I mean, as I see the results in people who did the practitioner training, I don't see any of this aspect in them, which the process work teachers teach a lot, which is awareness for subtle cues.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I really wanted to write about, was because Anne talks about it, but it's usually an afterthought. And I feel like the process of observing subtle cues and tuning into them, and what do they mean, needs to be made explicit.
Then read Mindell.
Because the Bodynamic people, they know a lot of it implicitly, but they don't teach it explicitly. Like if someone's collapsing their shoulders like this, or if someone's leaning forward in their conversation like this, like there's all these really subtle cues. And one of the things that I would really like to do is create an e-learning program for therapists where there's like video. Okay, there are pictures. Someone's body goes from like a normal position and goes into this. Okay, what does this cue mean? Or it does this, and then what does that cue mean? So like you start to train people, because it's like most people don't observe the body and what the body is saying very well. And so that's one of the things that I felt like when it comes to the process-oriented Bodynamic stuff, something like that could be taught, and it could be trained in a like almost like a computer program. Because there's another computer program. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Paul Ekman. He has this one where you're reading people's micro expressions, where it's like in a 16th of a second they go into like anger or sadness or joy.
Oh, Ekman, yeah, this is very old. This is like from the 60s, right? 70s.
70s, I think. Anyways,
we learned that in psychology. Yeah, I remember that.
He has an online training program, and it flashes images at you, and then you have to choose what emotion was it that was flashed in that image on you, and then it scores you. And then if you get above 80% score, they send you a certificate.
Yeah. But yeah, that's typical left hemisphere. That's left hemispheric. You need a right hemispheric approach. I don't know if you can do that with e-learning, because it's too much left brain.
Well,
the question in process work is not what does it mean. The question is, there is no question at all. You're just picking it up. If someone moves his little finger in process work, I would point to the little finger and say, wow, can you do that again? And the Bodynamic people, they think they know what it means, and they almost always miss the point. They're leading the process into their understanding. And that the problem is that they're missing like 90% of the rest of their understanding because they have known.
I guess I haven't seen that happen, because when Anne does it, there's like this one guy, his face is twitching, and she'll ask, well, what's that about? Because she's got no clue, and she doesn't make any assumptions and then do any work off that. So she'll notice things, and then she'll ask, what's that about? So there's a lot of things, because if the person's not aware or they can't come to the awareness themselves, then you're kind of forcing the process in that way. So you can have guesses, but then you never take them as baseline assumptions. And when I watch her work, it can be frustrating, because I feel like she's got no clue what she's doing. But then the session ends up being amazing. But she's so open, she's so tuned in, and she's so open, and it's like her mind, it doesn't seem like her mind goes into theory or meaning or understanding at all during the session, because she's just so tuned in to the process. But she does keep it contained. So she keeps it she does keep it contained within the developmental stage, or there's some sort of, she does this containment thing. Again, it's not explicit, it's sort of implicit. So
yeah, read Mindell. I mean, his books are the most, and his wife, Amy, and Arnold and Amy Mindell, they have both written books, and the first one you can start with is like Riding the Horse Backwards, something like that.
Okay.
But there's several ones, and they give you vocabulary for talking about elements of processes without going into the details. Because they have they have a process logic. There's a lot of logic to processes that when you hear it, you say, yes, of course. You say, like, it feels like you already knew that, but you didn't have words for it.
Right.
So one idea is amplification. You have to amplify something to kind of dig the meaning out. But meaning, they never talk about meaning, because what they say is we are only changing the channel of signals. Meaning is changing the channel for a signal into the verbal channel, and then we call it meaning. Or we go into the emotional channel, and then we call it has a meaning for me. But they don't interpret, because the interpretation is just, in the best case, it's just changing the channel. And changing the channel is very important, because changing the channel means that if some channel is unconscious, it has to become conscious. But the idea is only consciousness, not interpretation. So it makes you much more free in terms of how therapy can look like. Their problem is that they focus too much on not knowing, so they're kind of, kind of professionally stupid. And they know it. I talked to one of the senior teachers in Zurich and asked him, do you have any developmental scheme? And he said, how did you know that this is the only missing thing in our thing? I said, well. And he said, yes. And he said, this is completely missing. And he's trying to make it for himself by reading psychoanalytical stuff.
Oh, geez.
So forget it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know about Bodynamic.
Okay.
But he's not. The problem is all the teachers that I've seen, all but 3, the teachers that I know in process work, they tend to be very intellectual, very later structure people.
Okay.
Mainly opinion structure, solidarity, performance, and
so they're intellectually very curious. Is that?
Oh yeah, they're very open-minded, very curious, and the process work comes from Jungian psychology, and Jungian psychology is very intellectual.
Right.
So, and they're very, like, it's from love, sexuality, structure upwards.
Right.
So they're very symbolic, really poetic, and then they think that's it, but they don't sense their bodies.
Yeah.
So they don't have the lower structures. And yeah, that's missing, definitely missing. But if you combine the two, it becomes really shamanistic. It's like, because the shaman process is like completely open. You don't know what's going to happen, and whatever happens is included. The car that drives by, the people that are knocking at the door suddenly during the therapy, that's all included, because you wonder, okay, what does that make to the process?
Mm-hmm.
And it opens your awareness so widely, because suddenly it's not about the client, and you as a therapist, you're part of the process. You're not out. You're part of the process. You're an element of the process. So whatever you do is part of the thing.
Mm-hmm. This sounds a lot like dream analytical work in a way. Because like the most innocuous details in dreams often have significant sort of meaning by them, but the ego, like the conscious ego, doesn't ascribe meaning to them. But there's an important aspect to those elements that helps create the whole, or the whole understanding.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, in the Mendel work, they talk a lot about dreaming, but they don't mean the night dreams. They mean a level of consciousness which is constantly going on. It's like a flux.
Right.
And they say we're dreaming up things.
Yeah, I'm reading the Seth book right now. He talks about it's like a dozen layers between waking and sleeping. So there's all these different layers of consciousness, and there's all different, depending on what layer you're in. There's different dream layers as well, and depending on which layer you're in, there's different things going on in those layers, and then the interpretation or the meaning becomes different. And so you kind of have to know where you're at in the layers of the dream state to know how to work with it properly.
Yeah. And the Mendel people, they just have 3 levels.
Okay.
For beginners. They have like they say, there is the consensus level, like the reality that we're talking about usually.
Yeah.
Consensus reality. Then you have the dream level. That's where a lot of things are possible that are not possible on the consensus level. That's where we are at night dreams. So you can fly, and you can like eat animals, etc. And then there underneath is the essence level, which is where everything comes from, kind of.
Yeah. See, Seth takes the dream layer and splits it up into like all these different layers. Then there's the essence level, and the dream layers connect to the essence level, and then there's multiple layers in the essence level as well. And then he tries to map the whole thing out.
Okay.
And then for a person, like this is really advanced work. For a person to become aware of all the individual levels and layers, and to be able to draw information from one into the other, and then to know how it gets translated from one into the other, and how it's really complex. But if you can navigate those, he said the Egyptians were better at this. The Egyptians had a science to this, basically, or a temple art or whatever, where they would teach the navigation of all these sort of what he calls inner landscapes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
so I would say that the process work would be the closest approach on a popular level to that.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
And they have very good tools. I mean, they have developed for 30 years now or so, and they develop really good tools.
Okay. Seth gives there's about 100 pages of exercises that he gives throughout his 20 books on tools that you can use to try to navigate these realms. The biggest problem I have with the Seth stuff is hard to sort of decipher, because it's like he talks about it a little bit here in one book, then he expands on it in another book, but it's like in between all of this other information where he goes off and explains all these different things, and then there's no pictures to explain it. So I think probably one of my projects throughout my life will be to take that and make drawings out of it and break it down into a simpler way so that it can be understood. Because right now there's good information there, but it's like too little here, surrounded by all this other information. It becomes hard to pick out what's important, how to put it all together. Because the way he writes, it's kind of like he gets so carried away or so excited with what he's talking about that there's very little structure to it.
Okay.
So there's a lot of really good information, and it's very consistent with itself, but it lacks the structure to be able to really to really grasp it and hold on to it and to work with it.
But my guess would be that it doesn't really lack so much of the structure in between, but it's lacking the part that you can't write in books.
Yeah, and that's what he kept saying. He kept saying that I'm trying to teach you something with words that inherently you can't really use words with. So he's like, the communication problem is very challenging. So.
Yeah, it's not only that you can't put it in words. The thing is that you can't get it in because it's only on the intellectual level.
Yeah.
You see, if someone would teach the thing in a workshop, it would be completely different.
Right. Yeah.
It's like learning Bodynamic from a practitioner's script.
Right. I think that's good initially as training wheels, but the thing is, it can become the death of the system as well. Because then people can get locked into that sort of script kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. The problem.
It's like, in a way, you need to teach people a script initially. Then you need to break them out of it.
You don't need to. I mean, look. I think many things that you're saying are comparable to musicians. Like, what do musicians learn? You don't learn playing music by 5 years studying like music theory or learning about musical theory, and then you're allowed to touch an instrument. That's not how you learn. And that's the problem with all the so-called academic learning, that it is not embodied.
Right. But the thing is, as a musician, you can start by learning scales, and then you learn like basic rhythms. But you don't really become a musician until you go beyond scales and beyond like the notes on the piece of page.
Yes, but we don't have the equivalent to the scales.
It takes, and in a way, it takes years of practicing scales in these things before you can leave it and go into flow state, and then it just emerges.
Yes, but we don't have scales. We don't practice scales. We listen to.
In Bodynamic, we don't even have that. I want to bring that.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. So if you wanna know about, like, if you read interviews with musicians, especially jazz musicians, how they talk about being on stage, etc. That's the stuff that you were talking about earlier about the article. Is I remember Brett Mildow, the pianist, and he said, when you're on stage, when you're giving a concert, it's like driving a car, and you cannot look into the back mirror all the time. You can give a glance from time to time, but it's very dangerous to, like, when you're playing, to keep looking into the back mirror. And he said that's the equivalent to thinking about what you learned when you are in therapy.
Yeah.
It's like looking into a back mirror. It's like going down into your archives instead of being there with your customer.
Yeah.
Where are we now?
So I said, I'm like, well, this is a serious problem. Like, how do we train good therapists? Like, what if the structure that's there right now isn't working? Then how do we change it? What do we do? And that's sort of
the answer is pretty simple.
Okay.
In my view, it's a typical problem, is because Bodynamic doesn't apply the knowledge to itself.
So how would it apply it to itself? How would you teach that?
Well, one thing they teach, the thing is that you always start in a therapy, like a session, you start where the client is. You hook into the character structure that the client is in.
Okay.
Well, what I do is what the hypnotherapy people call joining. I have a lot of phrases that I put while I'm teaching, which bring people back to where we are, and where I'm joining where they are. So I'm saying something like, okay, now we're sitting here in a circle, and I'm sure that each one of you has questions. It sounds like a useless phrase, right? It sounds like, okay, what does that, like, why is he saying that? Yeah, and then I'm saying something like, and then I'm saying something like what I perceive where they are, and I'm combining it to my next step. That's hypnotherapy. like the NLP people are doing this, and the hypnotherapy people, they're always like, they're framing what they see and then they're putting one element to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I never go very far in my process without getting back to the joining.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see and that's why I'm watching the people all the time, and I see someone like getting nervous, and then I stop and I say, okay, I see some of you getting nervous, and then I ask, is that something we should bring up here? Or I see people like, they don't get an exercise, or they don't stand up for making it. And then I say, okay, I see you don't stand up. Do you want to ask me something?
Mm-hmm.
It's very subtle, but it's always, and I noticed that people in my workshops are getting more and more relaxed, even though my teachings are very dense. I mean, I say a lot. I like to speak very fast and a lot. And I see that how they more and more relax, and they seem to get it on a subconscious level, so that they feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, because probably has got to be one of the number one problems in training therapists. Because again, I'm making a generalization, but I would say majority of them have early will. And one of the aspects of early will is thinking you should know without asking, or that you're supposed to know without asking a question. So there's this way where people sort of check out where they feel like they should know, but it brings shame to them to ask a question, which really impedes their own learning process. It's the most frustrating thing about people with early will, is teaching them is like really challenging because they won't ask questions because they feel like they should know.
Yeah, but for me, maybe the idea of teaching them is already wrong. I'm not standing there to teach them. If I'm standing there to teach them, I'm already positioning myself in a very rigid way.
Okay, so
then
how are you positioning yourself?
Well, my main position is what I'm saying at the beginning of the workshop is, okay, we will spend 2 days together, which is a joining comment, and I want you to tell me in the first round, how do you want to use me?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hear from every one of you, like, what is your favorite usage that you want to use me for in these 2 days? What can I do for you?
Yeah.
And then they have to think about it. And then because I'm not asking them, why are you here? I'm asking them, how can I be at your service?
Yeah.
And then they think about it, and that activates kind of their will structure in a positive way, because now they are asked to use me.
Yeah.
They don't even getting passive. And then I tell them, okay, I can do this and this and this. Okay, this one I can't. Let's see what. So I'm responding to it.
No, that's brilliant, because that empowers people and puts the responsibility on them, so they don't go into a passive role, which is what the early will position is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm doing the same thing when people ask me a question that's not clear.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people are asking something like, saying, I didn't get what you just said. And then I'm saying something like, yeah, I didn't get it either. Or I'm saying, are you complaining? And then they say, well, no, can you say that again? And I say, well, tell me what you understood first. What did you get and where did you get lost?
Uh-huh.
So I'm always like kind of bringing them back to being active. And that's also the parts where everyone in the group normally wakes up. Because when I'm speaking personally to someone and kind of challenging the person, everyone is getting like, oh, what's going on here? Yeah. So they're very awake.
Yeah.
And I'm also including people a lot. So when someone is asking something, I say like, okay, that's a good question. Who else has this question here in the room? Or who understands the question? Raise your hand. Mm-hmm. So they're always like, there's a constant flux and dialogue between me and the group.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes people much more awake, and that activates the learning parts of the brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus all the rest, they feel secure, they feel safe, they feel like there's an open mind, and etc. All that.
Yeah. 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 No, that makes sense. Yeah, too much of the old school teaching methods are sort of seeping through in terms of.
Yeah, it's too intellectual.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it's too intellectual. I would say that the people that are there to learn are because of the way the materials being taught are being put into a position where they're too passive.
Yeah.
Or passiveness is sort of encouraged by the method of teaching.
Yeah.
As opposed
that's why I was like hooking into the word teaching. I'm not, of course I do teach, but I only teach like 20 minutes, and then I get into another role again, and
Okay.
I'm more confrontative. I'm more like a process catalyst.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the ideal way to train this material, or for people to learn it.
And the view is not that I want them to understand the material. My view is I want them to change their level of being.
Yeah.
And I always tell them, you have learned more than you know. Things will, like, you will change in the next days, and you will notice these changes over the next weeks.
Now you really sound like a hypnotherapist.
This is a suggestion, of course, but I know that it's true, and people come back to me and say it was true. It happened even before the workshop. Last weekend was about puberty and becoming an adult, and people came to me and said even 3 days before they already like had all these subject issues coming up. So I think it's a very dialogue-oriented version of teaching.
Uh-huh. So I'm curious about this joining thing. Did you learn that by watching others, or did you read about it in an NLP book, or where did you decide to learn how to teach in that way?
I think I learned it pretty quickly from my first hypnotherapy teacher, Stephen Gilligan in California. He did it a lot, and I was so fascinated by seeing how much that connected to people, and it was so simple.
Yeah.
It was so simple that I thought, wow, I can do that. It's like you meet someone, and you can say like, wow, now we meet, and you say like, well, this is a non-content phrase, but it's not. And then you say something like, now we are here surrounded by all these people, and we are looking for a good table in the restaurant.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean now it sounds a little bit awkward. Yeah, but you can say these things like in a fluent version, and people begin to feel comfortable with you even though they don't know you.
Right. Wow. So you learned it primarily by coming across someone who had really mastered that art.
I think I used it right away after I used it in all kinds of contacts, and then it became so natural to me that I didn't even think about it anymore.
Right. Yeah, because as you're describing it, I'm like, wow, that's because I've met people like that before, and I've always just assumed it was sort of, I guess, an unconscious natural ability or something. But yeah, but no, I think what you're talking about, if there's going to be a training for trainers, that what you learned off that guy needs to be taught. The joining thing to be taught. Yeah. That thing needs to be made explicit, and people need to practice it.
And if you practice it, I noticed that I don't even have to say it anymore, because I have done it so often that it's something in my energy now that is joining, that people don't even have to hear the words anymore.
Right. I mean, Anne does that in her therapy sessions.
Mm-hmm.
There's these what are called affirmational relational messages, where if someone's going through something hard, she'll affirm what they're going through, and then she'll affirm the difficulty in something. Then she'll affirm the resources. And she says all these things I've never heard anyone else say before, but they're so magical when she says them. And then, so what I did is I was like, okay, well, it's working for her. Let me try it. So when I first tried doing and saying these things, it felt wrong. It felt like I was like manipulating someone into like joining kind of thing. Like it felt off because it wasn't natural. But now it's like, if I go into session, it's so natural. I don't even think about it. But I remember at first, when I was first trying it out, it was sort of like, this is really awkward to say. People don't say these things. I definitely normally don't say these kinds of things. Yeah. But then it became really easy after I did it a bunch of times, and then it ended up, and then I ended up doing it without thinking about it. So it's the same kind of a thing. So I was talking to Anne and Joel about making mock therapy sessions where you follow a script, and where you have a client script and you have a therapist script, and then the client will say something, and then just to get that into people, that joining piece and the affirming piece. It's like, okay, now you say this, and you like read it off the thing, and then just to get people into sort of trying something that they've never tried before. It's going to feel awkward for them at first.
Yeah, and what I prefer is, instead of scripts, because that's very mechanical, is that you do little exercises where you just you practice this one little thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would agree. I'd say that's a better idea. Yeah, I was just coming up with stuff because I'm seeing so many people struggling trying to learn this stuff, and they really want to learn it. And the way Anna and Joel are teaching them, it's just not like the way they teach is the same as the way the Danes teach, but yet very different. But they're still, people are still not getting it, and so that's why I'm looking for all these little things in which how it could be changed. And I like your idea.
I'm reminded of something else that as you're talking, what I do is when I'm doing something, when I'm giving a demo session or I'm explaining something for a while, often I comment on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it while I'm talking. So I'm kind of like taking these little paraphrases, and I'm saying like, did you notice what I just said? I did this and this. So I make like a meta comment, like a technical comment on what I did, and then I continue talking.
Yeah.
And then I learned that from a Spanish teacher, and he was talking Spanish to the people. He didn't use any other language, so he only was speaking Spanish very slowly and making jokes, etc. And while he was talking, he was sometimes repeating something and explaining the grammatical rule behind it, and then he kept on speaking. And that was cool because you had like the two brains at the same time. They were firing at the same time. You had the rule and you heard it again, and there was repetition, and then he continued, and it was very emotional. Yeah. And I do that too, more and more.
Raja teaches that way. So when Raja does demo sessions, he'll be in process with someone, and then he'll temporarily jump out, and then he'll do a meta explanation of what he just said or what's going on for the client.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. He doesn't break the connection. He manages to do it in such a way, so he's teaching while he's doing a demo, and he manages to do it in such a way where he's not breaking connection.
Exactly. And I'm even doing that with a single client. I'm telling the client while I'm talking, I'm telling him why I'm interfering that way, or why I do that, why I say these things.
Yeah.
And relax.
Yeah. To be able to do it, to be able to like jump levels like that and not break the connection, that's a real art.
Yeah. That's what we have to learn. That's why I'm saying we have to learn to be flexible in the character structures.
Yeah.
I have to have all the structures like all active at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's 8 o'clock.
Oh, so that means you gotta go. Jeez.
Yeah, soon. Sometime soon, like 5 minutes or so. Like let's see. Do we have anything that we can also make another? We can make another date for next week.
Okay. Well, what day works for you?
I'm free. I have holiday now. I'm taking completely off for 2 weeks. So kind of after the Christmas days, I'm pretty free.
Yeah, I'm free all the time anyways.
Okay.
I'm probably more free than you.
Okay, I see.
My schedule's completely open.
Shall we do it? Shall we set us a new date?
Yeah, let's do it. There's a bunch of stuff I wanted to talk to you about.
We didn't even go into the stuff that you wanted to talk about, right?
Not at all.
Okay. Next time it's just your turn. Everything. Well, next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Shall we say next Thursday, 28th?
Okay.
Same time?
Sure.
7 o'clock. And if something changes in my plans, I will let you know. Then we can maybe postpone it. Because I have no plans at all, and probably I will meet some people or so. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm flexible. So if you ever need to change it to another day or a later or earlier time, that'll work for me.
Right. And I will also put in the evening of the of Wednesday, the 24th. Then we meet for dinner and.
Wait, so you want to try meeting on the 24th?
24th of January.
Oh,
in
January.
Munich.
Okay.
So that we have dinner together after the workshop part.
Okay. I'll put that
Because if I don't put it in my calendar, I may forget it.
Yeah, no, I'll put it in my calendar as well.
Yeah, cool.
That article I sent you, that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was sort of the state of sort of psychology trainings in general now. Because like one thing I was talking with the Bodynamic USA people was that ideally maybe the Bodynamic system should be taught not in workshops, but it should be taught sort of like a university curriculum, or I don't know. We're discussing ideas of how to completely change the whole training and like basically start from scratch.
Yeah, good.
So that's one thing I want to talk to you about. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was sort of how does Bodynamic fit in with the rest of the world in terms of psychology trainings? And could the organization align itself with other types of trainings, or if the goal is to produce the best therapists possible, should we make alliances with other people, or where are the big gaps that need to be filled? Because it's sort of like, for me, it's sort of like, what should I be focusing on now that I've more or less finished the website, I still have a bunch of stuff I want to post. I'm trying to decide in terms of what can I do now that will move the organization forward so that in 10 years from now, it's sort of like the best place people can be to learn how to be therapists. I don't know what to focus on. I'm a little torn between, I don't know how it should be restructured.
But I understand the question.
I don't know how much academia should be part of it or not, or other organizations should be part of it or not. So that's sort of like that. It's a big question, but that's kind of something I still want to talk to you about. So
we'll probably have some thoughts that we can share. I can share, and then we can see. Yeah, I think I get the question. I get the point.
Like, I guess my goal is, and this is kind of my goal in everything that I do, is I want to take. I'm being very will and opinionated here and performancey. I want to take the best of everything out there and bring it together. And if there's really good things that are sitting outside the system, I want to bring them in, or bring the system to that or something. I want to create the most premier sort of psychology system ever. So I want to know from you, what are the other really amazing things that are missing? Mm-hmm. And then how can we bring that together so that it's applicable to people?
Well, maybe I would reflect on the idea of actively bringing them together. I would more think of creating a field where they get like magnetically pulled to each other, and where they connect from themselves. Because if you try to do it by yourself, you will probably mess it up by something that you're not aware of. But if you think creating a field where that is possible, then I think it's good. And Bodynamic is quite good for that, because you have already kind of a meta system where you can put all the others and bring them together.
Yeah.
Without getting into the politics of who's better and all that.
Yeah. That's the thing I like. Is I like meta systems, and I like bringing people together.
Yeah. So that's the question: how to create a meta system that practically brings people together and brings the best voices together.
Yeah.
Cool idea. Yeah, I like that one.
So that's the essence of what I'm trying to get to.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Think about it, and then we can.
I'll let it seep in. Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Have a good time. You too.
Okay. Bye.